You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, they'll find a reason to impeach me.
Trump has repeatedly said
the Mississippi special election yesterday wasn't just another vote. It was the first time voters cast ballots in a newly created majority black Senate district ordered by a federal court.
On the night of November 4th, 2025, in DeSoto County, Mississippi, a county where, not long ago, black residents had no real voice in their own state senate, something happened that hadn't happened before, ever. A black woman won. Teresa Gillespie Isom became the first African-American senator and the first female senator to represent DeSoto County. She won with 63% of the vote, and she won because a federal court had finally ordered Mississippi to draw a district where black voters could actually elect someone who looked like them, lived like them, and fought for them. And it was a moment of hard-won Democratic progress, and it happened just months before the United States Supreme Court would move to make sure moments like that could never happen again. This is the story of an election that made history and a court ruling that may have ended it.
In DeSoto County, Mississippi, the votes have been counted. For Democrat Teresa Gillespie Isom, her decisive Senate victory was personal and historic.
If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell. This channel covers the stories that actually matter, and this one might be the most consequential of the decade. To understand what happened in DeSoto County in November 2025, you have to understand where that county sits.
Yes, it was history being made. First African American senator, as well as the first female senator in DeSoto County. So it was history.
Geographically, politically, and historically, DeSoto County is in the northern tip of Mississippi, just south of Memphis, Tennessee. It's suburban, it's fast-growing, and for decades it was entirely, predictably, reliably Republican. The 2025 Mississippi State Senate special elections were called after a federal court-ordered redistricting, triggered by a judicial finding that the state had unconstitutionally diluted the voting power of its black population when it redrew legislative districts in 2022. That finding resulted in something Mississippi hadn't seen in years, a reckoning. 14 special legislative elections were called across the state. New majority black districts were carved out not because politicians wanted them, but because a federal court said they were legally required.
For being here.
Good morning.
Let's start with what's happening in Georgia there with the redistricting. We have seen, since the Supreme Court decision, a race across the South to redistrict and to eliminate, for the most part, or at least to attempt to eliminate Democrat districts, but also those represented by African-American lawmakers.
The newly drawn District 2, which Teresa Gillespie Isom sought, covers portions of DeSoto and Tunica counties. And the woman who ran in that district, she wasn't a career politician. Teresa Gillespie Isom is a Memphis, Tennessee native who moved to Mississippi in 2005. She was a former director of nursing, a healthcare administrator, an advocate for Medicaid expansion and rural hospital protections. She was, by any measure, exactly the kind of person a district like this needed. She captured 63% of the vote over Republican Charlie Hoot's 37%. After the results came in, she said it clearly. Yes, it was history being made. First African-American senator, as well as the first female senator in DeSoto County. So it was history. That line deserves a moment to breathe. In a state where black residents make up roughly 35% of the total population, the first black female senator in one of its counties was only just now being elected in 2025. Not 1955, not 1975, 2025. Think about that. To grasp the full weight of this election, you need to go back 60 years. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is considered one of the most important pieces of legislation in American history. It came in the immediate aftermath of Bloody Sunday, March 7, 1965, when peaceful civil rights marchers were beaten by state troopers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, as the nation watched live on television. President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law that August. It prohibited discriminatory voting practices and gave the federal government tools to crack down on states that had systematically suppressed black voters for generations. But here's the thing, discrimination is adaptive, it evolves. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, southern jurisdictions had gotten sophisticated. They didn't put racist intent on paper anymore. Instead, they used at-large voting systems, strategic annexations and district line drawing that packed or cracked black communities, concentrating their votes so they could never build majorities, or scattering them across so many districts they could never elect anyone. The result was the same. Black voters had ballots, they just didn't have power. In 1970, Louisiana, Georgia, and Mississippi had no black members of Congress. None in states with enormous black populations. That absence wasn't an accident, it was architecture. So in 1982, Congress moved to fix that.
I wanted to talk to you about this once I saw this speech of yours this weekend, because I've been thinking a lot about the always and every time
feeling outrage that while families in Georgia are made to pay more and more for everything,
they have a case. Here's where the voting rights story and the political story converge in an unexpected way. Critics of Republican legal strategy argue that weakening voting rights protections is a direct response to a cracking MAGA coalition. If persuasion isn't working in places like Ohio, if former Trump voters are reconsidering, then winning through broad coalitions becomes harder. Restricting who can vote and how votes get translated into representation becomes a tempting alternative strategy. But there's an irony here that Democrats are starting to articulate. The Voting Rights Act protections that are now gone were a double-edged sword. Yes, they required majority-minority districts in southern states, but they also constrained what blue state Democrats could do when drawing maps in places like Illinois, California, and New York. Democrats in those states had to preserve majority-minority districts, even when doing so sometimes worked against maximizing Democratic seat totals. If those protections disappear nationally, Democrats in blue states gain freedom to draw maps in ways that could cost Republicans congressional seats. Whether Democrats would actually embrace that strategy is genuinely contested within the party. There's a real tension between a commitment to fair representation and a desire to use every available tool in what many view as an existential political fight. Agree or disagree? Which side do you fall on? Drop it in the comments below. On election night in DeSoto County, when the results came in, Teresa Gillespie Isom had something simple to say. She'd won, she'd made history, and she wanted to make sure her county finally had a Democratic voice. Those words meant something in November 2025. They meant it had taken a federal court order, a redistricting fight, and a hard-fought election to produce what democracy is supposed to produce on its own: representation. And then, 6 months later, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in a way that will make it far harder for similar fights to succeed in the future. The legal tools that produced Teresa Gillespie Isom's election, the tools built in 1965, strengthened in 1982, and defended in courtrooms for 40 years, have now been significantly dismantled. If you've been watching this channel for any length of time, you know we don't tell you what to think. We tell you what happened and we let you decide. What's happening here is real. The consequences are going to play out at every level of government: Congress, state legislatures, city councils, school boards, county commissions. Every jurisdiction that drew its lines with an eye toward meaningful minority representation is now in uncertain legal territory. The story isn't over, but a chapter has definitively closed. If this video gave you something to think about, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who need to see this. And subscribe if you're not already here. There's a lot more coming.